All right, we are here for another episode of interviewing members of our ward family, and today I'm sitting with Gloria and Bob Hamson. How long have you guys lived in this ward?
That's a hard question. We don't remember. Let's see, we moved here in 1979, so however long that is.
You've been in the same house the whole time?
No, we moved to a new house in 84.
If I remember correctly, you were telling me that the boys used to call your house to find out how the surf was. Is that right?
Yes, our house looks out over Seaside, Georges, Cardiff Reef. That's our front view. And so before they had surf cams and all that, the boys' friends would call at 6 in the morning because they knew I woke up early and get their surf report. At first, they had to come over to the house and train me in what they wanted to know. But it was very fun. Two of them especially called often to find out what the surf was like. And if my boys had already left to go surfing, that's all I told them, and they all knew, go.
All right, so I'm totally curious about home prices. How much did you pay for your house back then?
Do you remember what we paid for the house when we bought it? I think we paid $250. Was it like
yeah, something like that?
Around $250,000, and then put almost double that in the remodel.
Wow, that's amazing how things have changed. Well,
oh yeah.
Why don't you introduce yourselves a little bit? Maybe tell folks, obviously name, where you grew up, and a little bit about your family.
Okay, tell where you were, and your name, and where you grew up. A little about your early life.
Robert Lionel Hamson, Bob Hamson. What about
where you grew up? A little bit about.
Okay, I grew up in Pasadena, California, and I was fantastically interested in Boy Scouts and became an Eagle Scout back when it was difficult, when you needed the athletics and bird study merit badge. And now they've done better. Instead of bird study, nature study. I would have loved to have learned more about animals and plants rather than just birds. But birds has carried me a long way.
Tell a little bit about the ranch. You lived on the ranch for several years. In Newhall.
Newhall?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I went to Newhall Elementary School, where they had...
Tell about the ranch. What happened to the ranch after you left?
Okay. Yeah, my father bought a 102-acre ranch, and what did he pay for it? Not much, $18,000.
Wow.
Okay, so he put in a new house on the hill overlooking the property, and he sold it to someone in United States Steel. Yeah, a vice president of United States Steel, I guess. That's a little vague. What did he sell it for?
I don't know, but tell who that guy sold it to.
Walt Disney?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, movies have been made there.
For years, we could go to the movies, Walt Disney movies, and they'd show a short movie ahead of time, and it would have been filmed on the ranch. And Bob could say, there's the Oak of the Golden Dream, there's the road where I learned to drive, all these places on his ranch.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It was really interesting.
That's interesting. So other than being an Eagle Scout, what did you like to do growing up or in high school?
What did I like to do? Play soccer at recess.
Did you play basketball in high school or any sports?
No, just with the church.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And then I know you went to college. Where did you go to college, and how did you wind up in your career?
Well, I guess beginning college was I went to Caltech. First couple of years, so my father says I ought to go to BYU. And so, Caltech was tough. for me. I think I got in with the recommendation from the United States Steel, who donated heavily to Caltech. They moved my application to the top. And
then you went to BYU for 2 years.
yeah.
And by then, Bob was working for the Navy doing research, and so in the summer. And so then they paid for him to go to graduate school at Ohio State and paid him a full salary and then they got the research, and he worked for them in the summers. So he got his master's and his PhD at Ohio State. But he had to go back. He went to BYU after the master's because he had to have 2 languages for his PhD, 2 reading languages or fluent in one. And so he came back and studied German and Russian, and we met in a Russian
languages.
class. One day the professor didn't show up, and we all walked together down to the assembly and devotional, and that's how we met.
All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So, just to fill in the gap. So, Bob, what did you get your degrees in, and what was your career about?
Well, my father read the Wall Street Journal and decided electrical engineering was the thing. And I'm not sure it was for me, but he was right. That was a career to be had. Electrical engineering.
And I know that if I remember right, did you work for Qualcomm at some point?
No.
Who did you work for?
He worked for Hughes, and what's the name of the other companies here? It was
Raytheon.
General Dynamics, Raytheon. He
Yeah.
worked for GE. He worked
Yeah.
for, interestingly enough, he did some work for Johnson & Johnson.
Huh.
But almost all the work he had was top secret. And so he could not tell us what he was doing. And by the time he could tell us, it was okay. He can't remember what he did. Because the boys all came over. One day they wanted to hear Dad tell them about all these top secret projects. The only one we knew about was cruise missiles that were used over in
Gulf War.
Gulf
Yeah.
War.
Oh,
And
wow.
he had worked on those, and that we knew that. But the rest of all of his projects, I proofread his PhD dissertation and have not one word of understanding of what that thing was about. I did not know. But I could read the words, and there were periods and sentences and stuff. But no, I don't know what he was doing.
Wow. You guys have always been a couple. I've never thought of or seen you guys apart. So, Gloria, tell me about you, where you grew up and...
Well, my dad was in the military, and he happened to be stationed in San Diego, so I was born in San Diego.
Wow.
And then he was quickly, after my sister was born here too, and then he was sent to Hawaii. And we were at Hawaii when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. We were living in a new Navy housing on the hill right above the harbor. So my mother saw it happen. But then she closed the drapes because she had little children and she didn't want us to see. So we were there at that time. And then
wait. Let's not skip over that. That's fascinating. What do you remember about that day?
I don't remember anything because
Too
I
young?
was 1 year old. I was almost 2. My sister was 1. We don't remember a thing. The only thing we can't remember if we remember it or if we have been talked about it so much. But they gave us our Christmas present. My father was out on an island, and we didn't know for a couple of weeks if he was alive, and he didn't know if we were alive. But my mother had 3 children at the time. Yes, 3. And the oldest one was 4. And so she gave us all our Christmas presents, what they had bought before my father left for the islands. And we remember getting to open presents, presents after presents early, but we don't remember anything else. Although 3 of us are very afraid of small, dark places. And our mother thinks that's because when they would have air raids after the original bombing, they had quickly came and tunneled out a culvert under the road and put benches in there. And they would ring the air raid siren, and my mother was supposed to grab us children and take us into this dark tunnel under the road. And she did it about 4 times, she said, and then she decided she'd rather be bombed. And we didn't go there anymore. But we don't really, none of us. My brother heard it at first and told my mother, and she thought they were using dynamite to build a big hospital above us. But no, he said, that's not dynamite, that's bombs. And she opened the window, and it was.
Wow. Well, after Hawaii, where else have you lived?
After Hawaii, from Hawaii we went to Utah. Mother stayed there for the rest of the war because Dad was away, and of course in the fighting in the Pacific. And after Hawaii, we lived in California, a couple of places in California. And then he was sent back to Hawaii when we were I was 8 years old, 9. And that was a kid's heaven. Oh, they didn't have enough housing, Navy housing, big enough for our family because my mother was pregnant with their 5th child. And the Navy housing only had 3 bedrooms. And so they thought that was too small. So they finally found us a plantation home that the Navy had confiscated during the war that was right on Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
And they took my parents out to see it. It had a swimming pool, a mango orchard, a dock into the harbor. My dad's just thinking, heaven, heaven everywhere, if it turn these kids loose. And then the officer in charge of housing told him, sir, we're sorry to report, but there's a big problem with this house. Because when my parents saw it was totally empty. And so my mother thought, oh dear, what's the problem? Some big problem. And he said, we don't have matching furniture for all these rooms. And my mother just looked at him she said, that's okay. We can handle that.
We'll suck it up.
Yeah, we'll suck it up and take different. So we lived there for almost 3 years, 2.5 years, I think. It was heaven for children. We all learned to swim there. We got in a lot of trouble there in the harbor. It was very fun. And then from Hawaii, we went to Virginia, Quantico, a Marine base there, and then to Washington, D.C., I guess my dad meant. We lived in Centerville, Virginia, which at the time was way out in the country, and now is a very plushy place to live. I hear houses around there anyway. Then from there, we went to North Carolina, and then to Utah for a year while my father went overseas. After Utah, we went to Maryland. And then my father went to Puerto Rico while I was at the Y.
So what did you like to do growing up?
We liked to play outside. In Hawaii, we'd swim and ride our bikes. And we made a raft and went pulling around the harbor till we got caught. Then we couldn't do that anymore. And when I got to high school, I liked to play basketball because my first year of high school, before that I'd played a lot with my brother because he only had 2 friends that he played basketball with, and they needed 4 people. And I liked to play, so they'd let me play. So when we moved to North Carolina, I was a freshman, and I tried out for the basketball team, and I was 5 feet 1 inch tall. And weighed about 90 pounds. But I made the team because I could shoot, and I just loved that year. But then we moved to Utah, and they had no sports for girls at all. And the high schools I attended after that had no sports for girls. So I didn't get to play basketball again until after we were married. We moved to California, and the Stakes in the area, we lived in the San Fernando Valley, and the Stakes had women's basketball teams that were very competitive in the whole Southern California area. So our ward had a winning team. Boy, we had a lot of fun with that team. We were all young mothers, so we always had nursing babies and little kids everywhere and still played. It was really fun. Really fun.
Well, and I distracted you from earlier, so tell me about, it sounds like you went to BYU.
Yes.
What did you study? And then tell me about meeting Bob.
I went to BYU, and in those days it was heaven because you didn't have to decide what you were going to study for 2 years. You could take the general ed classes for 2 years, and you could take whatever you wanted. Nobody assigned you stuff. Well, you had to take freshman English and freshman math, I guess, and some history class. But I had tested out of all of those, so I didn't have to do that. So I just loved BYU school as a school because I just looked in the catalog, what do I want to take? And that's how I ended up in a Russian class. that would be interesting, I thought. And that's how I met Bob. That was, my second year? Yeah, and then I did my third year after we were engaged. Yeah.
So tell me about dating. Like, what caught your attention? What was maybe your first date or things you guys would do on your dates? And then how'd you guys wind up getting engaged?
Well, we almost all of our dates. I'm trying to think of any that weren't. Almost all of our dates were to the library to study, because I was taking 21 units so I could graduate early and working 20 hours a week. And Bob had a very tough language schedule to study because he had to get good in those classes so he could go on to get back and get his doctorate. So almost all of our dates were studying. Do you remember many that weren't?
No.
I really tried to remember. What did we do? We went to the library. We had a wonderful time. We enjoyed ourselves. But we went to the library almost every night and studied. And he actually came down to Puerto Rico. I went home for the summer because my dad had moved to Puerto Rico and had a job and worked in Puerto Rico. And Bob, the Navy, was sending him to some conference in New York City for his work. And so while he was there, he took a week.
You fly to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a week or 10 days, but he took time off and with his own money flew down and met my family and spent time with me in the summertime. And he asked me to marry him then.
Down in Puerto Rico?
That was my reaction.
Actually, would be where are you? At the lake.
Oh, but that was when you asked me the second time. The first time you asked me in Puerto Rico, and I looked at you and said, "Me? I'm way too young." And he started laughing, and he said, "Yeah, we'll talk later." And that was the end of it until, many months later, he asked me at BYU, at Provo Lake, at the Utah Lake.
And you must have said yes.
And I said yes that time because we got married the following summer. Yeah.
Were you married in one of the temples?
We were married in the Salt Lake Temple. Mm-hmm. My mother and her sisters arranged the whole thing from Puerto Rico and Salt Lake because I didn't have time to plan a wedding. I was working my head off, or my work was I worked for the University Press, proofreading and editing. And between my work and my classes, I was just busy all the time. So, a wedding had never been in my mind. It was something fabulous to plan. So,
well, and I know I'll ask you about your family in a second. I know you've also had a career, or maybe multiple careers in your life. Maybe you want to share with folks about the career that you've had.
Well, I graduated with a degree in psychology from BYU, but I wasn't quite finished when I left, so I had to send a couple of religion classes back that I took. They didn't have online then, but they had home study classes, and I took a couple other classes at Ohio State and UCR, University of California at Riverside, and sent them back, and then I graduated. And I was getting a master's degree at Ohio State when I was pregnant, and then I quit because I was going to have a baby, and I didn't care about that anymore. And so I took a 25-year maternity leave, and then went back to graduate school, got a degree in family therapy, and then I became a family therapist. And that was very satisfying. That was my only work. I mean, I'd taken a couple of little jobs over the years as the kids got older, but nothing really.
What did you like or learn maybe about as you were a therapist or being a therapist?
I learned how good people are. People are so good and kind. I learned that by seeing people get help from other people. And I learned that from one of the great blessings was being a therapist in the church. Because if you had a family with a problem in the church, you had all these people willing to help, able to help. They just needed to know how. And I worked with many wonderful, wonderful young bishops. I was so lucky because before I went to school, I had been teaching seminary for several years, and it was me and then a bunch of young men starting in their careers. And we would have a good time together in the Cardiff building, getting our classrooms ready and, sharing what we were planning to do and stuff. And then years later, when I became a therapist, those men were bishops. And they knew me and I knew them, and so we could really work together on a good basis that I think we were really able to help people. And just the quality of help that people could get was so exciting to me. I felt sorry when I got patients who weren't members of the church who needed some support because they didn't have it. So that's what I learned.
That's really interesting. So maybe now you can tell us a little bit about your family and your kids.
Can you tell a little bit about how many children and grandchildren?
Well, about our children?
Yeah.
Well, we had children. David, Carl, Ben.
Debbie.
Debbie, yeah. Debbie, David, Carl, Ben, Matthew, Chris, Lisa, Britton, Norman. That's 9. And all the boys are Eagle Scouts. The last one we got to be an Eagle Scout. We hit all the deadlines, and he got in so early that the bishop was...
That was David. That was the first one.
No, it was Norman, the last one.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, that's where we knew how to do it.
How to go through the process. How many grandchildren do you have?
I don't know.
46.
Ooh, and did you just get most of them together recently?
Well, we've been getting together. When we lived in Escondido before we moved here, so 40 years ago, we would come over to San Alejo State Beach and camp for a week every summer. So we've been doing that. And so this last 2 weeks ago was the week at the beach, they call it. And I think this year there were about 6 of them. You know, we can never get them all together because they've got so much going on. And so, yeah. It's been great. And some of the cousins come, the grandchildren come, whether their parents come or not. They just come and camp with another family or stay at my house or whatever. So, yeah, that's really fun.
Are you going to tell us who your favorite kid is?
I have 9 favorite children and 46 favorite grandchildren.
Great answer. That's a great answer.
And most of the grandchildren will tell you they are my favorite.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Speaking of favorites, let me ask you just to get to know you guys a little bit. So I want to know some of your favorite things. Like, do you have a favorite restaurant in Solana Beach?
No, going out to eat has never been our favorite thing. Bob has places he likes to go, but I'm not much of a restaurant eater. So
where do you like to go, Bob?
Steakhouse.
Out back in Poway, that's his favorite place. Yeah.
But see, she can't eat meat, and so there's a problem.
So we have to take you out. How about, is your favorite sport basketball?
Well, I don't know if I'd say that anymore. We both have always liked the beach. And after we were married, we moved, our first job was in San Fernando Valley, and we would go to the beach from there, of course, and seriously looked at learning how to surf, because we both rode boogie boards, but they didn't have boogie boards in those days. They were air mattress kind of thing. Was what you wore.
That's way back in the dark ages.
Yeah, but we thought we wanted to learn how to surf, so we tried it, and we realized we could do it. It was possible. We felt like it was possible, but it would take way too much time. We couldn't do it with little children. We had 2 little children at the time and 1 more on the way. So we always, all their life, all of them are beach bums, every single one of them, because they were raised by the ocean, in the ocean.
Now, I have it on good authority that you still boogie board.
Yeah, I do.
How often do you do that?
Twice a week.
Winter and summer, all year?
Oh, sure, all year. Because now I've got equipment. I mean, I used to go and be cold, but now, wetsuit, booties, everything. It's wonderful. It's really good.
So if you don't like going out to eat, what's your favorite food to eat? I know Bob likes steak. How about you, Gloria?
That's right.
Well, this week it's the oranges off our tree because they're so sweet. But I like fruit. I do like fruit, so I would say some fruit. Yeah.
Tell me about like a typical day for you nowadays.
Nowadays, is a typical day is I would get up in the morning and either go walk for miles or go to the beach. And then I would come home and maybe do a little work around the house if I have to. And then I would quilt probably for a couple hours. And
You would do what?
I would quilt.
Oh, yeah.
And work in my garden, fiddle in the yard, or go to the temple. I was working at the temple. And then Bob would get up in the late afternoon sometime. And he would eat and take care of his birds, feed his birds, put water in the bird bath. That he does not have many chores now, so that was good.
I don't have any what?
Many chores right now.
Yeah.
No.
Survive.
Survive.
Get enough exercise to keep alive.
Yeah, we go to the gym. We've been going to the gym together since before we were engaged. So at BYU, Bob started taking me to work out with weights, and there were no girls in the gym at that time, even training for ball teams. That was not a thing for women to lift weights. But Bob had read about it a little bit, and so we go together, and we've been doing that all for over 63 years and more. And we still go to the gym a couple of times a week at least. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's great.
Well, I think it really is helpful.
I agree. So I know that you've served a couple missions.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell folks about the missions that you've served.
You want to tell about the first one?
Yeah, we were called to serve in Nigeria. Nigeria Port Harcourt mission.
That's
And-
West Africa.
That's West Africa. We had to look it up. So, we had a good enough time there that when we got back, we put in our papers immediately again. And we noticed that when we were in the mission home being trained, that many people this was their third or fourth mission. And when it was our first, we were just not into it yet. Because it's so healthy, it's so fabulous experience on a mission. We would have a home sale to get rid of our stuff when we were going to leave, to sell, reduce our holdings.
Yeah, we had a garage sale, yeah.
Yeah, garage sale. And the weather just favored us. When you plan on going on a mission, you have help.
Yeah.
And,
It was pouring. It was pouring the day, it was supposed to pour. Pouring in the night, supposed to pour. And Bob prayed, cleared up. Garage sale went fine, got rid of a lot of stuff. And our mission in Nigeria was so unusual. And it was so...
When was this?
This was 2002 to 2004. And it was dangerous, actually, in some ways. But the church knows what's dangerous, and so they have plans, and they et cetera. But when we were before we went, I had been seeing a woman who grew up in South Africa. And when she heard I was going to Nigeria, and she thought the church was making me go, she sent me a 2-page typewritten letter, single-spaced, of all the reasons we could not go. It was, she was serious. And when we got there, we ended up in the mission office, which was hard for me and wonderful for Bob. But we would see the applications of the couples coming in, and over half of them did not come. They would hear stories. We felt greatly protected, and I guess people don't hear those stories as much, but it's a lawless country and very rough. I mean, people, stop you if you drive out of the city limits, and sometimes within the city limits, police will stop you with machine guns for money. And we were not allowed to give them money. We could give them magazines, church magazines. But believe it or not, they loved that. They loved the magazines, and so they were happy, and they would let us go. They had great respect for old people, so our hair helped us, our gray hair. And for missionaries. And we had the word missionary written big on the front and the back of the car. But Bob's car was attacked one time by a man with rock, broke the back window and the side windows out of the car, and then he opened the door, reached in, opened the door, and Bob's tried to get out, and he grabbed him, and they argue in the weirdest way there. If they have something they want to tell you or yell at you about, they grab your belt of your pants with their hands, so they hold you right close to them. So this guy grabbed his belt, Bob's pants, and then Bob's trying to peel his fingers off of him, when from behind him a Nigerian man comes with one of the weapons they use both to discipline children and to get their enemies, a long rope that is undone at the end with knots on the end of each thing, and flog. And he flogged this man, knocked him to the ground, and then people came running to kick the man. And Bob got in his car and drove off. So he was okay except for some cuts on his arm and stuff. And they didn't know he had just been to the bank and had 2 huge suitcases full of money in the back of the car.
Oof.
Because everything had to be cash there.
Right.
Nothing was, and the inflation, so that wasn't much money, but it looked like a lot. So,
What did you learn serving as senior missionary couples on these 2 missions?
Well, we learned that Heavenly Father watches over you, because we had several experiences where it was just amazing of the danger that could happen, and we just were fine. So we learned that He watches over you. That's one thing we learned. What else did we learn? I actually gained computer skills, because in the computer skills in the Nigerian mission, none of the young men the only young men there were from West Africa. Most of them had never touched a computer before, even knew what it was, so that you couldn't turn to the youth to help you. And in our mission for many months, I was the most knowledgeable person about a computer, which was laughable. It's laughable. But I did have enough sense to go to a cyber cafe and talk to the young man there, and I didn't know. Nobody had told me that you weren't supposed to have non-members work on church computers. So they would come to the office and help me and do things, help me any way they could, and then I could email my sons from a cyber cafe and ask them questions. We did not yet have cell phones. We had one satellite phone. The president had a satellite phone that he could use if he went out to a village where it was open land, and then the phone would work, but not near in the office, of course. And the first 6 months we were there, the office telephone never rang, because it had been disconnected at the pole. So it was just a totally different, experience. But I did come home with quite much more confidence. So we learned that, didn't we? Computer.
Yeah.
Bob was very good with money. He could keep track down to the penny. So they were very happy with him.
I remember while I was serving as bishop, you guys shared with me about how you've kept track of tithing over the years.
Yes.
I think that's an interesting story. Maybe you could share that.
Yeah, we have a book that I was going to take when I was interviewed before the Savior.
My book.
See, we paid our tithing.
Yeah.
What's recorded
it's
in the book?
It's a little brown notebook, and we have recorded our tithing in there from when we got married to, I don't know,
well,
20
present.
Almost to the present. And now it's all online, and so it's not in there. I put the slips in there, but it's kind of I just saw that book. Our daughter and her daughters came to help us. We had to move furniture around, and they came to help me put the office back together, and they saw the book, and they were very interested. They thought it was really cute. But it was nice to have it all in one place, and you used to give very little. And but then it seemed a lot.
It's a testimony of a lifetime, a testimony of sacrifice, which both
and
of
a
your lives
great
have
blessing.
been.
Great
Blessings.
blessings, much more than the sacrifice.
Well, maybe in winding up, the two of you could each share what the gospel of Jesus Christ means to you.
It means everything.
Yeah.
There's nothing more important except our personal relationship. So there.
That's the first word that came to my mind too. Everything, right? Everything good, everything, the happiness, the joy of seeing our grandsons go on mission, granddaughters, and marry in the temple when they do. The opportunities to work. The gospel has just blessed our life from beginning to end and saved us from so much heartache. You know, when you see some of the people of the world and the heartache they have for choices that they didn't know were bad, you know, or they didn't think they were bad. They just thought they were okay, you know. So the gospel means everything. Yeah.
Well, it's beautiful. I learned a lot, and I've been touched by the love that you have for each other, the joy you have for life, and your testimonies, which we all see by how you live. So thank you for spending some time visiting with us today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let me say one more thing. This is pretty gruesome. Bombing in Pearl Harbor, the military thought they were going to take over the land. I mean, they could come right in and do it. And so the Japanese were very vicious against women and children. And so since your father was gone to a secret place, and so one of the
One of the Marines came out.
Yeah, a Marine came out, and he gave us a gun.
Gave my mother a gun.
The purpose of the gun was not to shoot Japanese soldiers who would have a chance. It was to kill your own children and then yourself, so you wouldn't have to go through that. And they asked her mother, "Could you do that?" And she says, "Yes."
That'd be tough. Scary time.
Well,
Thankfully, it never had to come to pass.
Right, that's what my mother said. Thank goodness it didn't happen.
yeah.
You
She
guys
said yes because she knew they wouldn't take her out of there if she didn't.
got to do it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have had fascinating stories to tell, and one thing I forgot to mention is Bob's written a book, right? The
2
Politics
books.
of God. What's the other one?
Computer word
The signature of
God.
God.
Computer word print in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Oh, interesting. I haven't seen
Showing
that
who
one.
wrote the Doctrine and Covenant.
Yeah. Who wrote it?
Yeah.
The church experts think Joseph Smith wrote it. I mean, he brought the revelations in, and that's it. But the computer word print says no, he didn't.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
It matches the direct quotes of Christ.
It's the language or syntax of Christ.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which
That's
is
fascinating.
interesting, yeah.
Well, a couple
Way
books
to
that we can go
explain.
take a look at. But
Yeah.
thank you very much, you
Well,
guys.
thank you. Hopefully